Karen, thanks for holding through here with us. We'd love to hear some updates from you about what's going on in the city. Oh, you're muted. Let's see. You have to unmute yourself or hit the space bar. There we
Hey,
go.
good morning. Thank you, AJ. You guys have a really good turnout on your Zoom meeting, so that's impressive. Before I start, I just have to say, Patty, that was an excellent history. And the history of your father's company and still making fence boards in Arcata at Mad River Lumber is such a legacy. And if you haven't, as a Rotary Club, taken a tour of Mad River Lumber, we took our management team out there a couple of years ago. And I mean, it is an entire lumber mill process beginning to end, and it is so impressive. So I really encourage you to open up and give your whole Rotary Club a tour. Sorry to tag you for that, but it really is fascinating and right here in Arcata. So I just needed to say that because that was really fun to hear this morning. City Hall, city business is definitely not as usual, but I guess I just want to open with that we are, City Hall itself is closed except by appointment, but we are very open for services and support. Every department has staffing that is answering calls and certainly via email doing a lot of work. So every department is open. If there's needs that you have in the city, please do reach out and get your services met. City Council and the Planning Commission are continuing to meet via Zoom. We have public comments that are coming in at an email box, pc@cityofarcata.org, for any of those meetings. So do try to stay tuned. The Council and the Planning Commission are both working hard to obviously augment, but to try to keep some of the major business going. So for example, all of the approvals now for the Open Door Clinic project, wasn't that timely to be able to need to move that project forward. All of the approvals for that project have been completed, as well as the Creekside Home Development and the Isaacson's Affordable Housing Development. So all of those projects are through the regulatory process, and we'll move on to the building stage, which is exciting. We have last week took down visitarcata.com. We have revamped it completely to focus on just business support through the COVID-19 emergency. So I love that you're highlighting some of the businesses that have things that are happening in Arcata, and visitarcata.com is dedicated exclusively to that. So if you want to know who's offering takeout and one nights and how to order, all of the restaurants that are offering takeout are on there. I think all of the companies, but I'll double check. I wrote them all down in terms of, I know Move Well is on there, but I'll double check that Health Sport and Kinetic Coffee are also on there. And I believe they are. So if you've got other businesses or you see something on visitarcata.com that's not updated, please let us know. We really want that to be a source for people to be able to go to on a regular basis to see how they can continue to support local businesses. The council did pass two specific pieces of COVID regulation. The first one was some restrictions on renter evictions. It does not completely mirror what the governor did the following day. I like to say that he took his lead and copied Arcata, but I know that's probably not true. And his program does vary a little bit from Arcata's. What I'll say is the council, this was probably the most difficult deliberation I've seen in the Zoom platform. It can be challenging to have real substantive dialogue, but the council did work through coming from four very different angles on this ordinance to try to balance landlord needs in Arcata, which a lot of them, as you know, are simply Arcata families that have one or two other units. And yet, you know, our large student population and not high income population that is renting in Arcata, and the number of businesses that are closed and individuals that are receiving, you know, partial layoffs or complete layoffs as a result of this. So for those who cannot pay rent, specifically due to COVID impacts, they do need to notify their landlord before their rent is due for the Arcata ordinance, and then they do need to verify within 7 days that they actually have lost income from COVID-19. Both the state and the city's program are really designed for the renters to work with the landlords. The least that any of us can be, you know, in that process, the better. Ultimately, on a practical level, as these roll out, the way that I see them unfolding is that basically if a landlord and a tenant can't work it out, it's going to make its way into eviction process in court eventually. And then basically the tenant is going to use the city's ordinance or the state's executive order with whatever backup they held or maintained to the court, and the courts would ultimately decide if there really is some sort of a dispute. So neither of the programs are don't pay your rent programs. I mean, they all are just rent deferral programs. And so we're really going to try to start to message that this is not a just don't, you know, there's a weird email out there, which is Arcata Rent Strike at gmail.com. And I've seen a couple of folks that have notified their landlords and then have said, you know, if you have questions, talk to our representatives at Arcata Rent Strike at gmail.com. So I don't know where exactly. I'm going to try to track down where that's coming from and just get the messaging out that every landlord that I've talked to has compassion for folks that have income loss at this time. The idea is to build that relationship, make that relationship stronger, get your rent paid. If you can just pay partial payment, we encourage you to do that, but trying to find that balance. The second program that Greg Foster alluded to is that the city felt like we wanted to get out as quick as we can with some business emergency loan funds. So we will try to tie those in, and the council gave the city manager's office flexibility to work into the programs that Greg had talked about, because right now the city's loan program is just up to $10,000. But as Greg's programs ramp up with Headwaters funds and Humboldt Area Foundation's funds, the idea is that we could use our $10,000 for Arcata businesses to match into those programs as well to get up to the $25,000 for individual business loans. So please reach out directly to David Loya at our office if you've got immediate needs and need to get cash into your business before some of those other programs are up and running. That is what the council wanted that money to be available to get out on the street quickly. So please reach out if you can. Let's see. We have suspended all water shutoffs in the city, so we won't be shutting off anyone's water. We do still have buses, one bus route that is operating. We call it the Orange Special Route. So buses are free in Arcata right now to protect our drivers. We've sort of done a plastic barricade between the drivers and the riders. So riders are entering and exiting from the back doors only. Therefore, they don't go through the pay station. So buses are just free, but they are operating only 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I would say ridership is dropping tremendously, but we do still every day have about 40, 50 people that seem to be using the bus to get to work, to some of the essential work services, and to purchase their essential services. So we are still operating at this point. Other than that, of course, we've got a lot of closures. All of our playgrounds, all of our basketball courts, tennis courts, bocce ball courts, facilities. I know you guys were affected by, you know, having to cancel a major fundraiser. Many nonprofits in the community were also affected that, you know, had the community center or D Street Center that were rented for fundraisers. So certainly the city refunded any expenses that were associated with those. But right now, at least through the month of April, everything has been suspended in terms of programming and in terms of use of city facilities. I can certainly answer any questions that folks have. One of the most common ones that's coming up right now is that for the first, I'd say 2 weeks of the COVID-19 emergency, we really saw our unsheltered population, our homeless population, sort of move out of sight, away from the plaza, away from the Veterans Park, away from some of the areas that we traditionally see that population. And then within about the last week to 10 days, there seemed to be a real migration towards both the transit center and the community center. So the city's been working with Arcata House Partnership, and I would offer, if you're looking for ways to donate, especially around food security, Arcata House Partnership serves an enormous amount of food in the Arcata community. They serve as both the food pantry and as daily food service. They're doing about 60 lunches a day. The 60 lunches a day, mostly in that unsheltered population, but they also do food pantry delivery and pickup to a host of folks in within the city limits of Arcata. So working with them as our primary partner and working with Department of Health and Human Services at the county, we're looking at what is the best practice associated with that sort of larger camp, which is maybe at about 30 people now. The police department did a real good survey talking to just about everyone within that community last weekend. Most of them seemed amenable, with the exception of a few, to being moved to a different site to try to get some additional social distancing. What we've ended up doing is sort of socially distancing them into smaller groups around the community park at this point. We have brought in some additional porta potties and hand washing stations. And basically what happened was, a few of them started to congregate there, and a few community members basically decided that they wanted to provide some further assistance. So they brought down a bunch of tents and a bunch of food and camping gear, and made some pretty significant donations, and started helping them set up larger camps. So, and that same small group of community members has been continuing, I think, to bring food. So we are working on a few things. One is I've got a couple of calls still today looking at some private property sites that we might be able to provide some better social distancing to move them into smaller groups for those that are willing to do that. Those that are over 65 have a documented disability or an underlying medical condition that meets the CDC standard. We were told on Wednesday that FEMA will reimburse 75% of hotel costs for that population. So yesterday, Darlene from Arcata House Partnership and I and the police department spent a lot of time. We've come up with about 24 names in that population right now that we think would be eligible for that. So once we get confirmation from the county that we could start to work to move them into hotel sheltering, we will. And then we'll see what we've got left, that need some more maybe permanent areas to shelter in place, even if it is an outdoor campsite. And we've got 5 spots of city property that the council reviewed Wednesday night. And I've got maybe 2 or 3 that are private. We did reach out to all of the churches last week to see if they would be open to taking 1 to 3 tents each. And most of our churches right now obviously are closed, so their normal staffing that is on site isn't there to be able to watch over the facility. So it's a really challenging time for them to take on that task. So we're trying to look at other sites that just might be a little bit more open and visible that we can do sort of daily patrol on. Other than that, I certainly can answer a ton of questions, but I'll maybe just turn it back to you, AJ.
Thanks, Karen. Do we have any questions out there for, we could take 1 or 2? All right. We are a little bit past date. So thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate you sharing what's been happening in the city of Arcata. Such weird times. I keep saying that. Unprecedented, but we'll get through it.